Happy New Year. It's the first Sunday of the 2023 Church New Year, the first Sunday of Advent. The long green season is over. We now wear blue, the color of hope, and I hope to be wearing it next week. This is blue, I guess. The long green season is over. And we begin to read the Gospel of Matthew for this coming year. It's his turn. Excuse my voice. I just want to assure you it's not painful for me to talk at all. So please just put up with the annoyance of the sound of it for a little bit. In fact, we begin the gospel readings this year from the end of Matthew, some of the last words that Jesus speaks in that gospel. They remind us that the season of Advent is not just about preparing for a baby to be born. It's also about preparing for Christ to come again for the second coming. It's about judgment and looking at our lives anew. Forget resolutions in January. Now is the time. Sleepers awake. Paul in his epistle today says to the Romans, you know what time it is. It's time to get our act together. He doesn't mince words. Let us lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us live honorably as in the day, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in debauchery and licentiousness, not in quarreling and jealousy. Instead, put on the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul's message is clear. Either we get what Jesus is saying and we decide to live a righteous life, or we don't. Now is the time to make up our minds. We are living in interesting times. Over the past 6 years, we have survived 3 nasty political campaigns. We have dealt with the confusing world of living and dying with COVID-19. There have been extreme weather events that have underscored the effects of climate change, and gun violence in the United States has escalated, both in highly publicized individual mass shootings and in daily reports of violence in gang-ridden neighborhoods in our cities. And on top of all that, we have a gospel today that's downright scary. It's all about Christ's second coming. And it's alarmingly apocalyptic. Quite a few people I've talked with lately from all sides of the fence are spending a good deal of time worrying about the future. They are imagining all sorts of wild scenarios with horrific consequences. But we can choose how we will respond to unsettling events. We can choose our attitudes. I used to be an obsessive worrier, but about 30 years ago, I actually started to pay attention to what Jesus had to say in the Bible. Remember the lilies, he said. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life? I realized then that 95% of what I worried about never came true, and that somehow the remaining 5% did not destroy me. Through God's grace, I was able to muddle through those difficult times of loss and grief. I survived. I learned from them. Somehow those trials I had worked through gave me the armor of light St. Paul talked about in today's gospel. Somehow I had what I would need to face the inevitable new trials and tribulations that would come my way. I just had to put fear aside and remember to trust that God walked with me. Now is a wonderful time to practice the fine art of being a non-anxious presence, being calm, putting fear aside, It's a greatly underrated virtue. Let us remember that God is still working in the world, doing nothing but good. Let us look for signs of that work and join in. With Micah, let us ask to do justice, love, mercy, and walk humbly with our God. We need to listen to one another with respect and forbearance. We need to remember that once we speak a word, it is impossible to unspeak it. We have a mission statement that could not be more relevant than it is now. Jesus accepts all at his table. That was great. Accepts all, everybody, rich people, smart people, weak and vulnerable people. We aim to be true Benedictines, hospitable people. When Saint Benedict established his monastery, he assigned a porter to the front door to make sure guests would always be greeted. And it was especially important to him that the poor would always be treated as guests. It's easy to welcome people in this place who look like us and talk like us and think like us. But what about the person with whom we don't feel some affinity? A person who might come to this place and challenge us, might even change us. Well, we need to listen to that person, and we need to really see them. And we need to put aside fear and trust that this person is a gift from God, that we will learn from this person, that we just may be entertaining an angel unaware. Right now, just about every Episcopal congregation in our diocese is experiencing lower attendance and consequently diminished pledging. We too are feeling the pinch. We could react with fear, anxiety, worry, and even panic. Let's not do that. Let's walk into this challenge with optimism and the hope that characterizes the season of Advent. God has always taken care of St. Benedict. Let's trust that care will continue. Let's move into this new church year with optimism and resolve. And if I or anyone else seems to be making decisions out of fear and worry, call us on it. Put on the armor of light. As I work on a sermon during the week, my train of thought often starts in one place and ends up in a place I never expected. That happened this week as we approached the first Sunday of Advent, and I found myself focusing on putting fear and worry aside. And then a song popped into my head, You'll Never Walk Alone, which comes from a 1945 musical, Carousel, written by Rodgers and Hammerstein. The setting, circumstances, and meaning of the song were not intended to be religious, but it has been presented in a religious context so many times, even sung in church services. It has been recorded numerous times by everyone from Jerry and the Pacemakers to Roy Orbison to Elvis to Marcus Mumford. It has become the anthem of the Liverpool football team and is sung right before each home game by the crowd. You'll Never Walk Alone is actually the club's club's official memo. And if you've watched Ted Lasso on Apple TV Plus, you've heard it sung. at the end of one of the episodes. Excuse me. God is never mentioned in the song, but I believe it is difficult for anyone of faith not to think of God when listening to these lyrics. So, with no further ado, let's close with a listen. This version, excuse me, it's a good thing I'm done, features Marcus Mumford, and the lyrics are at the end of your bulletin. Please feel free to sing along if you want to.